Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, All for Indigenous Businesses, Open Doors by Selling to the Government. Thanks so much for joining us, and we have an hour together, so let's get started. Before I do a formal introduction, I'd like to start by acknowledging the land that I am on. So I am from what's known as Kelowna, and I'm on the unceded territory of the Okanagan and Syilx people, and they have cared for this land for millennia. And I invite you to acknowledge the land that you are on, whatever community you are from around BC, or maybe it is from another province. So if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat what nation that is from, please go ahead. I acknowledge that there already has some information shared on our chat box. So thank you so much. And while we get busy doing that, I will do a short introduction about me. My name is Danielle Hofer, and I am the Outreach Officer at Women's Enterprise Center. And I have the unique opportunity where I build partnerships and collaborations from Women's Enterprise Center to other outreach and support organizations. So if you know of an organization that we should get in touch with, please reach out to me. I'll have my contact details. And also, if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover for training, we are always developing new content. So please reach out to me, and we'll make sure to add that to our roster. So webinars 101, everyone's been on Zoom a lot lately, but how do we want to work during this session? So we have both a Q&A and a chat function. And if you want to interact with other attendees on the session, please go ahead and use that chat function to share ideas and even share some info about your business. If you have a question for myself or our panelist, please use the Q&A and we will monitor that closely. We will pause once during the middle of the session and then once at the end to make sure all of the questions are answered. And I'm pleased to share with you a little bit about Women's Enterprise Center. So we are a not-for-profit organization dedicated to helping BC women realize their business potential. And we do this through a couple key ways. So we have a business loan program where you can access up to $150,000 for your business. Whether you're an existing business or in the startup phase, you can apply for this funding. And it needs to be majority owned and operated by a woman. But even if you have a male partner, you can connect with us and we'll make sure that you're the majority owner and you make the decisions in the business, and you can still apply through us. We also offer professional advice and resources. So this is a complimentary service that we offer. So no matter what stage of business you're at, you can access our expertise and our knowledge, and this is free. We also have skills training like this webinar. So we love to deliver training, and luckily we've been doing online training prior to the pandemic. So we're quite well positioned to be delivering content. We also have mentoring programs. They include peer mentoring, one-on-one. We also have a program called Taking the Stage. So if you're looking to connect with other women in business, our mentoring programs are a great way to connect. And lastly, we do have a supportive community. So by working with Women's Enterprise Center, you're among friends, you're among other women entrepreneurs, and we love to celebrate and support one another. So make sure to connect with us. During this pandemic season, we have additional resources to support women entrepreneurs. So specifically on the funding side, we have the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, which is a fund created by the federal government for people who have fallen through the cracks and can't apply for CEBA. So you can access up to $40,000, and then up to $10,000 of that would be granted if you paid back within 2 years. So if you're interested in that program, make sure to get connected. And I would love to introduce today's session. So here we go. Each year, the Government of Canada spends billions of dollars on goods and services and construction from Canadian businesses. And opportunities for contracts exist for businesses of all sizes. So don't think you're too small to work with the government. Through the Procurement Strategy for Aboriginal Business, the federal government wants to connect with Indigenous businesses and nation-owned businesses to open doors for new opportunities to sell to the federal government. And today we will share details about the opportunities available to Indigenous businesses, such as the Indigenous Business Directory, who is eligible and how to register. How the government purchases goods and services from Indigenous suppliers. How the federal procurement opportunities work and how to find them, and how to find funding opportunities. And lastly, Emily will go over some COVID-19 resources for Indigenous entrepreneurs. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Emily Given, who works in business development at Indigenous Services Canada. As the program officer, Emily Given provides policy advice and guidance to the federal procurement community, as well as Indigenous business owners looking to do business with the Government of Canada. Emily understands that economic development in Indigenous communities is a step towards reconciliation and works every day to seek out opportunities for Indigenous inclusion within government contracting. So in preparation for this webinar, in speaking to Emily, she shared with me that this job started as a co-op, but then it turned into something where a lot of her passions could meet. She says, I'm a feminist and a person of color, and I want to help Indigenous businesses succeed in any way I can, because I believe that it's an important step towards positive socioeconomic outcomes for Indigenous peoples throughout Canada. Emily also has an Etsy shop where she sells crafts and likes that her job allows her to support other women entrepreneurs. So Emily, it is an absolute pleasure to have you. I'm so excited to spend the next 40 minutes learning about how we can support Indigenous entrepreneurs. So it is over to you.
Thanks so much, Danielle. So my name is Emily. I'm really happy to be here with you today. I'm not in BC. I'm actually just outside of Ottawa. I am on unceded Algonquin territory, and I'm very grateful to be here because it's really beautiful today with all the snow. It is freezing, but I have a warm coat, so I'm okay. And I will get started. Let me just share my screen. I hope everyone can see that.
That looks great.
Great. So I work at Indigenous Services Canada. We run the Indigenous procurement team, which has a lot of different facets to it. This is what I'm going to be talking about today. I won't get into it too much because I don't want to waste too much of our time. So I'll get right into it. Indigenous businesses contribute massively to the Canadian economy. According to the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses, there are over 43,000 Indigenous-owned businesses in Canada, and they generate approximately $10 billion annually in total revenue. As I said, my office is the Office of Indigenous Procurement. The idea is that Indigenous economic development, including procurement, will lead to business creation, growth, employment, and economic reconciliation in Indigenous communities across Canada. And this inherently will lead to positive socioeconomic development and positive outcomes. The Government of Canada has realized how powerful procurement can be in contributing to positive socioeconomic outcomes. So in December 2019, just over a year ago, the Prime Minister issued a ministerial mandate which committed the Minister of Public Service and Procurement Canada to work with my minister at Indigenous Services and the President of the Treasury Board to create more opportunities for Indigenous businesses to succeed and grow by creating a new target where at least 5% of federal procurements have to be awarded to Indigenous owned and managed businesses. This commitment is still in the planning phase, but we will hopefully see it roll out sometime this year. ISC kind of plays a middleman or a facilitator role in Indigenous procurement. So we work with both other federal departments and we work with Indigenous businesses. When it comes to federal departments, we help them purchase from Indigenous businesses through the PSAB program, and I'll talk more about PSAB later. And then when it comes to Indigenous businesses, we help them become more visible to the federal government so they are more likely to win contracts. We help share knowledge with them about the procurement process because it can be very hard to navigate, especially if you have never done it before. And we also try and help them, create the best chance that they can have at winning federal procurements. I'm going to talk about the procurement strategy for Aboriginal businesses now, which is our program that we run out of ISC. It was created in 1996 and it was launched to make it easier for Indigenous businesses to compete for and win federal procurements. What PSAB does is it takes government procurements and it sets them aside so they're exclusively competed for by only Indigenous businesses. This creates opportunities to generate wealth in Indigenous communities and close socioeconomic gaps by increasing Indigenous participation through the procurement process. The first step to winning or even bidding on a PSAB set aside is you have to first be registered in ISC's Indigenous Business Directory. It's a fairly easy registration process, and actually I'm going to be doing a short tutorial after my presentation on how you can register your business in the IBD. But as I said, it's really easy and it won't take that long. And once you're registered, it only takes us about 20 minutes to, it takes about 20 minutes to register, and it takes up to 48 hours for us to approve your business, and then it will show up on the public interface. So the first step to registering in the IBD is making sure that your business is eligible. So when it comes to eligibility, the Indigenous person must have at least 51% ownership, so majority ownership of the business. And if the business has 6 or more full-time employees, at least 33% of them have to be Indigenous peoples. In the case of a joint venture, so if there is 2 businesses that come together to create a JV, the Indigenous business has to have majority ownership of the JV, so at least 51%. Also, in the case of a joint venture, all Indigenous content must be at least 33% of the total value of the work performed. And if you have more questions about the eligibility criteria, you can ask them in the chat and I can address them later. And as I said, I'm going to be going over the registration process after my presentation. Like I said, it's a fast and easy process to register yourself. It'll only take about 20 minutes. We approve your registration in about 2 days, and then you will appear on the public interface. Being registered has a lot of benefits for businesses. It allows you to build partnerships and joint ventures with other Indigenous businesses. It allows you to identify potential subcontractors. It increases the visibility of your business because it's a public search engine. So public and private industries, all levels of government, really anyone is able to see your business profile in the IBD. Being registered also helps you stay informed of upcoming local networking opportunities because we will provide you with emails that have this information. So networking opportunities and big procurement news, we will send you emails with that information. PSAB is a national policy, meaning that Indigenous businesses have the opportunity to compete for procurements throughout Canada. The only thing that takes precedence over the PSAB policy is comprehensive land claim agreement areas. I believe there are 24 CLCAs in Canada, and they have their own procurement policies. So those take precedence over PSAB, but if you're not in a CLCA area, you won't have any issues with our PSAB policy and applying it. So PSAB works, I think I've mentioned this, but it works through set-asides. This is when contracts are set aside to be bid on exclusively by Indigenous businesses. In order for the process to be competitive, there needs to be at least 2 Indigenous businesses bidding on a contract. There are 3 different types of set-aside, and I'm going to get into them now. The first type of set-aside is a mandatory set-aside, and it's used for procurements that are destined for an area or a community or group where Indigenous peoples make up at least 80% of the population, and where the Indigenous population will be the primary recipient of the good or the service or construction. The second type of set-aside is a voluntary set-aside. This is probably the most common type of set-aside that we see in my office, and they are used anytime as long as it can be proven that capacity exists. If a government entity or a department comes to us wondering if they should set a procurement aside, wondering if capacity exists, we will do what we call a capacity search, where we search the IBD to determine how many registered businesses work in the industry in question. And if it's more than 2, we will always recommend a voluntary set-aside. The third type of set-aside is called a conditional set-aside. It's probably the least common type of set-aside, but in my time at ISC, I have seen them get used more and more frequently, which is really interesting because I see them as a great opportunity for Indigenous businesses. How they work is when us at ISC or the government department in question can't prove that there is capacity, so they can't prove that there are 2 or more businesses to have a competitive process. So what they do is they post the tender as an open tender, and then if 2 or more Indigenous businesses bid, it will become a voluntary set-aside, and the contract will end up going to an Indigenous business. Just for your own knowledge and to help you understand our program, we call procurements that are just open tenders, we call them regular contracts. If you're an Indigenous business bidding on an open tender and you're not registered, you can still bid as an Indigenous business and register after the fact. We also like to mention that if you are an Indigenous business and you see an open tender that you think there is capacity for, we always encourage you to email us and let us know that this tender is out there, it's made public, and you think that it should be a set-aside. And what we will do at my office is we will reach out to the contracting officer who's in charge of the procurement, and we will try and get them to set it aside. So it will be, the contract will be awarded to an Indigenous business. And we've seen a lot of success with this, especially in the past few years. So yeah, if you ever see a procurement that you think should be a set-aside, please reach out to my office. Another way that Indigenous businesses can sell to the federal government is through standing offers and supply arrangements. Standing offers and supply arrangements are similar, but not quite the same. So a standing offer is used to meet a recurring need when a department or an agency is repeatedly ordering the same good or service. I always like to use office supplies as an example. There's a pool of pre-qualified suppliers, and the good or service is available at a pre-arranged price. There's no contract until the government issues a call-up against the standing offer. A supply arrangement is used when a good or service is bought on a regular basis, but there are no pre-arranged prices. So the list of pre-qualified suppliers, they will have to bid on the supply arrangement. Generally, standing offers are used for goods and supply arrangements are used for services, but this is not a concrete rule. To incorporate PSAB into standing offers and supply arrangements, what contracting officers can do is have an open stream and a PSAB stream. So there will be a separate pool where exclusively Indigenous businesses will be visible. Standing offers and supply arrangements at least once a year. And we recommend to Indigenous businesses, if they want to get in on a standing offer or supply arrangement, to reach out to the contracting officer before the annual refresh and let them know that when it renews, they would like to be on the list. The third way that I'm going to talk about today of how you can sell your goods or services to the federal government is through Indigenous participation components. We call them IPCs at my office. There's a lot of acronyms. It can be confusing, so I hope I'm not confusing anyone. This happens when a portion of the value of a very large contract is set aside for Indigenous businesses. They're flexible and they can be tailored to specific procurements, and there are different ways that Indigenous participation can be counted in an IPC. We group them as direct participation versus indirect participation. Some examples of direct participation in an IPC would be things like subcontracting, hiring Indigenous businesses, or providing training opportunities for Indigenous businesses or Indigenous individuals on the project. Indirect participation are things like scholarships, bursaries, donations to Indigenous organizations, things like that, and those can also be counted against an IPC. And just for your information, IPCs are monitored really closely by our office to make sure that the prime contractor is like holding up their end of the bargain basically, and filling their responsibilities towards the IPC. The vast majority of government contracts are posted on buyandSell.gc.ca. So it's essential that if you don't already know, a lot of people already know how to navigate it, but if you don't know, it's really important that you get familiar with the website. I'll be the first one to admit that BuyandSell is not a very user-friendly website. So thankfully, OSME, which is the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, they offer training sessions on how to use the website and benefit from it. If you are interested in this training, I think Danielle already sent my deck out, but if she did not, you will receive my deck. Contact information is here. If you are interested in signing up for buy and sell training, I think they offer sessions once a month or once every 3 weeks or something, but they're really useful. I have taken them myself, and that's how I learned about buy and sell. So I highly recommend the training session. You may not see low dollar value contracts posted on buy and sell. A low dollar value contract is anything lower than $25,000. For these requirements, it's common for a source list to be used to identify suppliers who can provide the good or service. If you are interested in getting on a source list, the best way to do so is through networking through the federal government. To network, we recommend using the GC directory or GEDS, and there's a link here. You'll receive the PowerPoint, so you can just click on the link. GEDS is basically a phone book of the Canadian government employees. You can look for a contact in a specific department that you are interested in selling your good or service to. This process can be kind of daunting, so if you need a place to start, we also have a network of procurement coordinators who specialize in Indigenous procurement. They all have information about procurements and PSAB set-asides for their respective departments. So we have one Indigenous procurement coordinator per department. Some have more than one. If you're interested in receiving this list of contacts, please let me know and I can send it out to you. This is just a bit more information on the procurement coordinator network. So as I said, there is at least one Indigenous procurement coordinator in each department, and they have all the information on what the government is doing in terms of procurement, different contracts that are set aside, anything that you want to know. They're a great point of contact for Indigenous businesses. So I just want to touch on COVID-19, not really anyone's favorite topic to talk about. It's had detrimental impacts on all businesses in Canada, but Indigenous businesses have of course felt the impact of the pandemic. So there was a survey taken, I think it was last spring, so April and May, by the Indigenous Business COVID-19 Task Force. 91% of survey respondents said that the pandemic has negatively impacted their business, and 76% of the respondents said that the worst impact was on their revenue. So to mitigate the negative impacts of COVID-19 on Indigenous businesses, ISC has participated in the implementation of several different initiatives. ISC has supported the establishment of an Indigenous Business COVID-19 Task Force, which brings together leaders of Indigenous business organizations and national Indigenous organizations to provide the Government of Canada with a single unified Indigenous business voice during this time of crisis. And another thing that the Indigenous Business Task Force put together was a database of all Indigenous businesses that can provide PPE to the federal government. If you're interested in learning more about the database or getting your business on the database, if you have PPE that you're willing to sell, please send us an email and we can tell you how to get on the list. There has also been a lot of funding made available to small and medium-sized businesses, including Indigenous businesses, through a few different avenues, one of them being NACA. And ISC has launched a concierge service where Indigenous entrepreneurs interested in selling to the government are provided with pertinent information on selling one-on-one advice and guidance, referrals to the First Nation Inuit Health Branch if you're selling PPE or any other medical equipment, and the COVID-19 Indigenous Business Database, as well as resources about additional government programs and services that might be able to help you. I now just want to talk about funding. So there's no funding arm attached to our program, the PSAB program, but there are a lot of funding avenues that you can take that we recommend from our program. The first funding opportunity that I want to talk about are Aboriginal financial institutions, which we call AFIs. You might already know all about them, but for anyone who doesn't know about AFIs, they are autonomous, Indigenous controlled, community-based financing organizations. They provide developmental lending, business financing, and support services to First Nation, Métis, and Inuit businesses in all provinces and territories. They are managed by NACA, so you can find more information at naca.ca. They also have distributed some of the COVID relief funding. And if you go on the NACA website, you can find an interactive map where you can determine which AFIs are close to you and might be able to help you, like close to you geographically. The next funding opportunity is the Business Development Canada, or the BCD, and they have funding as well. They are a federal development bank structured as a crown corporation, and they're wholly owned by the government of Canada. Their mandate is to help create and develop Canadian businesses through financing, growth, and transition capital, venture capital, and advisory services. And they focus on small and medium enterprises. The BCD also offers Indigenous specific entrepreneur loans. So if this is something that interests you, I encourage you to reach out. We also always tell people to check with their local banks, because a lot of local banks do have unique programs designed for Indigenous entrepreneurs. So it's always worth checking in with them. A couple more funding programs that are a little bit different than the previous three that I mentioned. These are not so much business funding, but still great funding opportunities for Indigenous peoples. The first is called the Community Opportunity Readiness Program. This one and the next one are both housed out of my department, Indigenous Services Canada. So CORP addresses the financial needs of Indigenous communities when they are in pursuit of and wish to participate in an economic opportunity. So just to be clear, this is funding available to Indigenous communities who might need it to take on an economic opportunity. The next program out of ISK is called Lands and Economic Development Service Program, or LEDSB. More acronyms, I'm sorry. The government of Canada, there were 5 older programs, and they were all kind of rolled into the LEDSB program. They're all community-based economic and land management support programs, and they will help increase Indigenous participation in the economy, as well as allow Indigenous communities to have greater control over land management. If you're looking to upgrade your skill set, the Indigenous Skills and Employment Training Program is designed to help you do this, so please visit their website for more information. This program is housed out of Employment and Social Development Canada, but there also are a number of similar programs housed out of Indigenous Services Canada. So just send us an email if you want more information about any of the programs that we have that might allow you to upgrade your skills. That's all I wanted to talk about today. This is our contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We try and get back to people within about a day or two. Please ask any questions you have. We're always happy to help you. And now I'm just going to change gears. Oh, I forgot to ask if you had any questions.
Yeah, I think now would be a great time to pause and see if anyone has any questions. I'm not seeing any in the Q&A function. But this session is recorded, and we will be able to send it out. Actually, I am seeing a question in the chat. So the question is, what are some examples of types of goods and services purchased by the federal government?
Thanks for your question. It's really anything that you can possibly imagine. So it's things as simple as office supplies and desks and chairs for our offices, and IT equipment, but it's also things like construction projects, projects that are funded by the federal government. So big things like construction, big IT installs, anything like that. It's really anything that you could possibly imagine. Just to give you an example, my department just purchased 250 masks from these two Indigenous elders who were making like really nice beaded handmade masks. And we bought that through, it was a low dollar value contract. So we found them, and it wasn't never posted on BuySell because it was a low dollar value contract. But they contacted us and let us know that they were making these masks, and yeah, we purchased them and they're beautiful. So it's really anything you can imagine. What might be easier is if anyone is concerned that maybe they don't have a good or service that they can sell to the federal government, let me know and I can show you contracts on BuySell where the goods or services that you provide have been purchased in the past by the federal government.
Maybe it's easy to go the other way. Are there some goods and services that cannot be purchased by the federal government?
I'm sure there are goods and services that have not been purchased by the federal government, but that's not to say they can't be. It's just to say that they haven't been in the past, just because there hasn't been a contract for them. But like really anything you can imagine, like the federal government spends billions every year on procurement. So I think last year it was like 30 billion or something like that. So it's a lot of money. And there's a lot of opportunities for Indigenous businesses to access these opportunities. So please don't hesitate.
Great. Okay, and I see one more question and then we'll get to the second half of your presentation. So thank you, Valerie. I'm a self-employed interior designer who took a hiatus for 12 years. Can you help me get my business up and running again?
Yeah, we absolutely can. So whether you need funding or you're looking for opportunities, we can help point you in the right direction. I have seen contracts for interior design actually, which is pretty exciting because that might be a good opportunity for you. I think our email address, I'll post it in the chat. If you want to send me a bit more information, Valerie, on what you need in order to help you get your business running, we can chat offline if that's helpful. My email was in the presentation, but I'll put it in the chat as well.
Excellent. And Valerie, Women's Enterprise Center also has lots of resources to help you with your business. So combining Emily's resources and ours, I'm sure we can help you get your business up and running again. So thank you for the question. All right. And so I will turn it over back to you, Emily, to give us that step-by-step on registering.
Yes, perfect. So we never used to do these little rundowns of how to register in the IBD because it's a pretty user-friendly website. It's pretty intuitive and self-explanatory. Every step is pretty well explained on the website, but we noticed we were getting a lot of questions about certain steps, a lot of the same questions. So we started doing this run through just to kind of make the process a bit more seamless if you're not registered and you want to register your business. I just want to provide a bit more information on the IBD. So obviously you need to be registered if you want to bid on Setasides, but it's also just a great tool for all Indigenous entrepreneurs. I always recommend, even if you have zero interest in ever selling to the federal government, I still recommend that you register in the IBD just because it increases your business's visibility. And it will allow, although like it's a tool that the whole federal government uses, it's also a tool that is just available to the public. So even if a private sector company is looking to employ an Indigenous business, they might use our IBD. So it's a great place for all opportunities, not just public service opportunities. So we always encourage everyone to register, even if they have zero interest in selling to the federal government. I'm gonna share my screen again. And like I said, it's not a complicated process, but there are a few areas where people do run into trouble. and we just like to flag those. So the way that I don't have a deck, I'm actually using just my Internet Explorer, and I've made a profile. Yeah, so my business is called Emily's Amazing Business. It's a fake business, but I let my colleagues know that my fake business was in the IBD so they don't accidentally approve me and put me on the public interface, because that would be an issue. I'm going to show you each step of the process, and this is the most important part. This is probably where we get the most emails. So I'm just going to show you again. I've already made my profile, and I clicked edit. So when you first make your profile, you will get an email with the reference code saying, thanks for signing up for the IBD, here's your reference code. If you ever want to edit your profile, you need the reference code. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. So I auto-saved mine, but make sure you save it to your computer, write it down. I don't know how you save important passwords and things like that, but this is really essential. And unfortunately, you can't change it to like a standard password. So yeah, write this down because this is very important, and we get a lot of people who lost the reference code. Yeah, so the first step is you're gonna have to pick between a basic profile and a mandatory profile, or advanced profile, sorry. Basic is fine. If you wanna do your advanced profile, that's totally acceptable, but basic has all the information that we need in order to approve you and get your profile visible. You don't need to do it in English and French. If you are a Francophone, you are more than welcome to do it only in French. You can ignore the English steps. Sorry, I'm just reading through my notes as I do this. It's also important that the name that you enter here is going to be the same name that you enter when you bid on a set aside. So if I put Emily's Amazing Business is my name here, and then I bid with the name Emily's Incredible Business, unfortunately, I won't be eligible for the set aside because it looks like a different business. So we've seen, that's pretty uncommon. Like most people don't change their business name like at the drop of a hat, but if you ever enter a business name and then your business name, you want to change it, let us know and we can help you with that process. And then as you can see, it's all pretty self-explanatory. This is an important step just for our data collection. So whether you're on or off reserve. Country code, I did not know what a country code was. Maybe everyone else does, but it's one in Canada. So everyone in Canada is the same. But yeah, as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. I always like to flag the company description step because the first, I think it's 250 words of your description are the most important. Because when we do a capacity search, so when we are looking through the IBD to see if there is Indigenous capacity for a certain contract, the first thing that we will see is the 250 words of your company description. So make sure you put the most important information at the beginning and then save the like fluffier stuff for near the end. Because when we do an extract, that's the first thing we're going to see. I also just want to mention, make sure you don't press save and exit till the very end. It will autosave, so just press continue. I'm not sure if we have any men listening today, but salutation is actually an important step, especially for our data collection purposes, but also just for, just as an example, we hosted a panel a little while ago where we wanted female entrepreneurs to speak. We were looking for like 5 female entrepreneurs who had their businesses registered in the IBD. And the way that we found them was through the salutation. So if you are okay with identifying that you are a female business owner, please fill in the salutation because it's great. It's a great tool for us to use to help find different opportunities for you, whether they're business opportunities or just exciting things like speaking on a panel. Again, pretty self-explanatory stuff. Oh, I want to mention that the data provider doesn't have to be the owner of the company. If you have a different date, if you have like someone else who works for you who's going to be managing the IBD profile, this is where they would go. But if you own the company and you're the data provider, that's fine too. It's really just whoever's going to be going in here and changing information. You're going to want to make them the data provider. This is where you will add your employees. So I am the only employee of my fake company. But if you wanted to add an employee, this is what it would look like. I'm just going to press cancel. And this becomes important kind of later on when we're talking about eligibility for the IBD. Yeah, this is what we're going to talk about on this step. So this is where the eligibility criteria for the IBD comes into play. Just to reiterate, if you're an Indigenous business, the business has to be 51% Indigenous owned. So majority Indigenous ownership. I said I have 100% ownership, but if it's split, make sure it's 100 or 51% Indigenous ownership. And I mean, I said I only have one full-time employee and it's me, but if you have 6 or more full-time employees with at least 33% of them have to be Indigenous persons. And you would indicate all that here. So you could add a second owner if it's split ownership. This is where all this information goes. This is the uploading of the status card is the easiest way for us to verify if your business is in fact owned by an Indigenous person. There are other ways that we can verify that, but this is the easiest and fastest way for us to do that. Now I'm going to talk a bit about
Emily.
Sure.
What if someone does not have a status card?
There are other ways that we can verify. So there's like a status card office out of ISK, and they usually can help us with cases like that. So it's not a problem if you don't have a status card. We can verify in other ways.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just going to talk about GSIN codes now. So GSIN codes are kind of used throughout Canada. They're especially throughout buy and sell. They're how in Canada we code different goods and services. They're kind of confusing at first, but you'll see that it's really not that complicated, and maybe you already know all about them. When I started in government, I thought this was like a different language, but it's really just a simple code for identifying different types of goods and services. So at this stage, you would just enter what you're selling basically, and we always tell you to like make sure the scope is bigger rather than smaller. So you don't have to be too specific. Make sure it's a big scope and you capture everything that you do when you're entering goods and services. This is kind of confusing, but NAIX codes are different than GSIN codes. NAIX stands for the North American Industry Classification System, and it's used throughout Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So when we're exporting to the rest of North America, this is kind of the classification system that's used. So that's why you would have to enter your NAIX codes as well, but it's the same idea as GSIN codes, just different codes, which is kind of frustrating, but whatever. And again, as I said, for the GSIN codes, make sure the scope is bigger rather than smaller when you're adding what goods and services you provide. So at this stage, this is the final step of the basic application. I would click submit registration, but I'm not going to because I don't actually want to submit it. So I'm just going to click save and exit. And then whenever you want to edit it, if you don't submit it yet, and you want to go in to edit it again, it will end up here. But if you want to submit it on like the first go, we always encourage you to make sure your profile is like as good as it can be the first time you send it in to yeah, like we always encourage your profile to be like as complete as it can be when you click submit profile, because it can be kind of, we've been having issues just with everyone working from home. Our office and our like IT staff has had to adjust, and it has been a bit complicated to give people the correct permissions to edit a profile from home. So make sure your profile is as complete as it can be when you first submit it. In the advanced profile, just to give you an idea of what's there, licensing. So if you're like a food company, all the different, or like I like to give the example of a first aid company, all the different licenses and certifications that you have, you can list those in the long profile. And then you can list your accolades, you can list your awards, anything like that is all in the advanced profile, but none of it's necessary to register in the IBD. It's just kind of if you want to have a bigger, longer profile with more to show, and that's totally fine. Whatever you choose to do works for us. As I said, the most important stuff is what I showed you in the basic profile, and probably the most important part of the basic profile is the company description. I'm just making sure I didn't miss any important information. So when you register, you will get 2 emails. I already talked about the first one where you will get this code, this reference code. So that's the first email you will get. And then once you submit your profile, you will get a second email saying, thanks for submitting your profile. You actually won't get an email saying that, hey, we verified your profile and now you are live in the IBD. So if you have any questions, like if this doesn't happen really, but if you do have any questions or you don't see your business after a few days, send us an email and we'll see like what the holdup is. But it usually takes about 48 hours to approve a profile and see it in the IBD. Also, I talked about this in the presentation, but we do send out mass emails to the entire IBD. They're usually about upcoming events or upcoming procurements that we think are, might be pertinent to our businesses that are registered. We don't send emails out that often, so like we won't bombard you. They only come maybe once or twice in like a 2-week period. Maybe you'll get one a week, but if you don't want to see our mass emails, you can unsubscribe from them, and that's totally fine. I hope you found this useful. If you are registering your business and you are kind of stressed about the registration process, please send us an email before you register and we can have a call and we can walk you through the registration step by step. Or you can do it yourself. And if you run into issues, you can write them all down. Give us a call. We can help you sort out your questions. We just want to make sure that the registration process is as seamless for you as possible and that you end up in the IBD as quick as you can, so you can start capitalizing on all the opportunities that the IBD has to offer. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now. And if we have any questions, I'm happy to take more questions. I know it's a lot of information to process. So if you might hang out for a few hours and then realize you have questions. So please send us an email later if you think of anything that you were wondering about our presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily. Is your email the one that you just sent us, the Indigenous Procurement at Canada.ca?
That's our general inbox where we take most of our questions about the IBD. Okay. If you have questions about the IBD, I would recommend emailing them there just because my colleague Kim is actually the one who will probably be dealing with most of those requests. My personal email, like my work email, I'll put it here too.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me personally if you have any questions or concerns. I'm always happy to walk through the registration process with you. Yeah, and if there's ever something I can't help you with, someone on my team will definitely be able to help you. So I hope you found today helpful. And if you ever have any questions, please reach out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily. I definitely learned a lot. There's a lot to learn. And I think that's a great invitation to follow up if you have any questions that come up. And of course, we will be sharing the recording as well as Emily's slide deck, so you'll be able to follow along again. I'd like to let you know about some upcoming webinars that we have. We have an excellent brand new human resources strategy toolkit webinar series. It's launching on January 26th, and you can register at wec.ca/HR series. That link will be shared in the follow-up email. We also have a special program dedicated to Indigenous women entrepreneurs who are working on their business plans. So that one starts in February. It is limited, and if you are interested, I would recommend registering as soon as possible because we've got lots of interest in that program, and I think there's only a couple spaces left. It's a peer mentoring learning versus a more general webinar such as this. We also have a financial fitness series. So we cover cash flow forecasting, we cover balance sheets, your income statement, how to analyze your ratios. Might sound boring, but it is one of the most empowering practices that you can do. Take control of your finances because you can see the opportunities in the numbers. All right, and so we are curious how we did. Please fill out our webinar evaluation. The link to this evaluation is on the slide. You will be entered into a draw to win a $50 e-gift card. We really care about your feedback and are always keen on improving. So that link will also be included in the follow-up email. So that is a wrap for the presentation. I'm going to take one last peek at our Q&A and see if there's any last questions. All right, I'm not seeing any, and I'm going to open the chat and see if there's anything else. All right, I'm seeing some thank yous. Excellent. So that is a wrap for today. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Danielle. If you want to connect with me, you can reach me at inquiry at Women's Enterprise Center, and you can put in my name. That will go to our general inbox, and we answer those within 24 hours. So you'll hear back from us quickly. And again, thank you so much, Emily, for the information. And everyone, all the best with your businesses. We look forward to connecting with you on another webinar in the future.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Stop recording.